What you are about to hear will make you rethink parenting in a completely different light. This shocking story of a 17-year-old girl brutally murdered and buried by her own boyfriend is one that I truly believe could save your child's life. Jayden Parkinson was a girl who radiated joy and a love for life. Her slightly mischievous nature harmoniously combined with her natural charm. From her early years, there was a special bond between Jayden and her mother, filled with love and trust. Her openness and friendliness helped her find many friends at school. Everyone who knew Jayden noted her sensitivity, cheerful disposition, and kind heart. Studies came easily to her, and her dream of becoming a hairdresser inspired her to move forward. But at the age of 7, Jayden's life underwent a dramatic change. Her parents decided to divorce, and unexpectedly, custody of Jayden, her brother, and her sisters was awarded to her father by the court. He moved the children to Oxford in the United Kingdom. This move was a real shock for the Parkinson family, especially for the children who were used to the atmosphere of love created by both parents. They missed the fun holidays and pleasant surprises that mom and dad would arrange to please them. It remained a mystery how the father managed to get custody of the children. It was clear to everyone that this decision was a real blow to both the children and their mother, especially to Jayden, who had an extremely close relationship with her mom. Family friends claimed there were no obvious conflicts or negativity between the couple. However, despite all efforts, the mother failed to defend her right to stay with the children. The teenage years brought new trials for Jayden. Her irrepressible energy and awakened rebellious spirit complicated her father's attempts to cope with his daughter's upbringing. Despite retaining her kindness, charm, and wonderful sense of humor, she faced typical problems of adolescence, especially after moving to high school. Relations with her father became increasingly strained, despite his sincere attempts to surround the children with care and provide them with everything they needed. Nevertheless, he was stricter and more demanding compared to their mother. At this age, Jayden perceived her father's care as a restriction of freedom and a manifestation of excessive control. The situation was aggravated by the lack of regular communication with her mother, whom Jayden missed terribly. All this led to constant conflicts and misunderstandings. In search of understanding and support, Jayden began to run away from home. This problem, unfortunately, is quite common among teenagers. But it is worth noting that Jayden did not wander the streets or join questionable companies. Instead, she would immediately go to her mother to spend time in the comfort of her home. At the same time, Jayden did not stop communicating with her father, answering his calls. But at the first opportunity, she tried to return to her mother because it was with her that she felt truly loved and understood. Despite all the trials, that special bond between mother and daughter remained. It seemed that the difficulties of adolescence only strengthened their relationship. During one of these visits to her mother, Jayden confided in her about the troubles she faced, including the growing tension with her father and the feeling of being misunderstood. One day, Jayden met a boy who, at first, seemed to understand and support her. This relationship quickly turned toxic, but Jayden, longing for affection and understanding, didn't see the warning signs. She believed she had found someone who truly cared for her. Unfortunately, this boy's influence led her down a dark path. This decision raised quite a few eyebrows. Some people around Jayden thought this was a clear sign of her emotional immaturity. But Jayden, she was captivated by the idea of dating an older guy. Ah, young love. Of course, at her age, Jayden was still pretty naive, struggling to navigate her emotions. Despite the warnings from friends and family, a romantic relationship bloomed, filled with hopes and dreams for a happy future. Jayden envisioned a life of bliss, completely unaware that her fate was now tied to a real-life monster. From the moment Ben became Jayden's boyfriend, he started embedding himself into her world. He made friends with her classmates, despite the obvious age difference. Somehow, he managed to connect with these school kids and even became a sort of leader among them. Talk about charisma. Ben didn't stop there. He showered Jayden with attention and care, making her fall deeper and deeper in love. He spun tales of a bright future together, painting vivid pictures of a life full of happiness. Jayden, caught in his spell, believed she'd find the happiness her parents never achieved. But, as you might guess, the honeymoon phase didn't last. Just a month into their relationship, Ben's behavior started to shift. He became possessive and manipulative, and insults and humiliation followed. This was Jayden's first relationship, and she had no idea what was normal. She began to blame herself for Ben's change in behavior. Classic manipulative tactic, right? Ben was a master at exploiting Jayden's insecurities. He would nitpick every little thing she did, setting her up on emotional roller coasters. One moment he'd shower her with compliments, telling her how beautiful and charming she was, making her feel on top of the world. The next moment he'd cut her down, finding faults in her behavior or words, leaving her in a whirlwind of confusion and self-doubt. Jayden, in her naivety, couldn't see the manipulation for what it was. Ben's control over her tightened. He isolated her from friends and family, convincing her that they didn't understand their special bond. Slowly but surely, he was breaking her down, making her dependent on his approval and affection. To an outsider, the red flags were glaringly obvious. But for Jayden, who was head over heels, these warning signs were easy to overlook. Love can blind us, especially when we're young and inexperienced. Ben's constant presence and manipulation made Jayden believe that she needed him to be happy. Eventually, Jayden started noticing the cracks in their perfect relationship. The highs were fleeting, and the lows were devastating. Friends and family grew increasingly concerned, urging her to see Ben for what he was, a toxic and abusive partner. But it wasn't easy for Jayden to just walk away. Ben had woven himself into every part of her life, making it feel impossible to escape. Realization dawned on Jayden slowly. It took time, but she started to see through Ben's facade. With the support of those who genuinely cared about her, she began to gather the strength to break free. It wasn't an easy road. Breaking away from someone who's manipulated you emotionally is incredibly tough. But Jayden did it. She took back control of her life, learning a valuable lesson about self-worth and the importance of healthy relationships. Once, while walking with Jayden's friends, he openly expressed his dissatisfaction with them. This was a typical manipulator tactic to isolate his victim from her close environment. Unfortunately, Jayden didn't realize what was happening. Each accusation from Ben made her feel guilty, and she started to believe her behavior was the cause of all their conflicts. But then, Jayden dared to stand up to Ben, defending her right to communicate with her friends. This caused Ben's furious anger. He used various manipulative techniques to make her quarrel with her friends. Jayden tried to maintain these friendships, but gradually, everyone turned away from her due to Ben's toxic behavior. Despite everything, Jayden's feelings for Ben didn't fade, even as his behavior became more outrageous. Once, he even hit Jayden in the face. It was obvious such behavior couldn't be justified, but Ben managed to convince Jayden that she was to blame and deserved it. Her family saw the danger, worried about her, and tried to intervene. But infatuation clouded her mind, and again she chose Ben over her family. Ben's behavior grew more unpredictable. After one quarrel, he caught a neighbor's cat and brutally killed it, throwing its head into Jayden's bed to take revenge. Jayden was horrified, but Ben managed to confuse her and make her doubt the reality of what happened. Ben played the role of a lover masterfully, but behind his charming smile hid a sadistic soul. Ben didn't stop at threats to Jayden's pet. He went further, stating he could just as easily take Jayden's life and her entire family's. Jayden, due to her limited life experience, simply couldn't see the signs of a serious mental disorder. His foster family quickly realized that Ben was a ticking time bomb. One day, after getting into trouble with the law yet again, his mother confronted him. Instead of remorse, Ben exploded in anger, grabbing a screwdriver and threatening her. Can you imagine? A teenage boy threatening his own mother with a screwdriver. Despite the fear and shock, his mother decided not to press charges. Instead, she sought help for him, hoping to find a way to tame his violent tendencies. Ben ended up in a psychiatric clinic, and this is where things get even more chilling. During a session with a psychiatrist, young Ben, still in school, casually discussed how to commit the perfect murder and dispose of the body without getting caught. Let that sink in for a moment. He was only 13 years old at the time. The psychiatrist, both horrified and intrigued, tried to delve into Ben's mind, hoping to understand what made him tick. Ben, on the other hand, seemed to relish the opportunity to share his dark thoughts. He explained that the best place to hide a body would be in a freshly dug grave. You know, just casually bury someone and go on with your life. It's terrifying to think that these thoughts were coming from someone so young. Back to Jayden, trapped in her own horror story. Ben's threats became more frequent and more severe. He used every tactic he could think of to keep her under his control. Meanwhile, law enforcement was closing in on Ben, aware of his escalating criminal behavior, but not fully grasping the extent of his danger. Jayden felt completely lost. She knew she had to get out, but how do you escape someone who has threatened your life and shown they're capable of unspeakable acts? The psychological torment was immense. Ben's control over her was a powerful lever, pressing down on her every move. Jayden was in an emotional freefall. Her life was spiraling into despair as Ben's control tightened around her. She would sob alone, feeling utterly cornered with no way out. Ben was relentless in his quest to isolate her, cutting her off from her family and controlling every aspect of her life. When words failed him, he didn't hesitate to resort to physical violence. It was a systematic breakdown of Jayden's world. Ben didn't have a job, so he used Jayden to fuel his criminal activities. He coerced her into stealing from her own home. Under his manipulation, she was forced to pilfer items, sell them, and hand over the cash. The constant lying to her family created a rift that left Jayden isolated, but she feared Ben's wrath more than she feared the truth coming out. As if things weren't grim enough, Jayden's only escape from this torment was to move in with Ben. Unfortunately, his cousin, who had been a temporary roommate, moved out soon after. The cruelty Jayden faced during this period was horrific. Beatings became a daily ritual. Ben would drag her to the bathroom, brutalize her, and lock her in there for hours. She felt utterly trapped, unable to go back home due to her past thefts, and terrified of Ben's threats against her family. Ben's control over Jayden was suffocating. He locked her in rooms, monitored her every move, and demanded permission for even the smallest actions. Jayden's entire world was consumed by Ben's toxic behavior, and her self-esteem was shattered. She was subjected to relentless abuse, strangling, punching, biting, and kicking. Her life had become a living nightmare. But amidst this darkness, a glimmer of hope appeared. Jayden's mother, realizing the gravity of the situation, made a valiant effort to rescue her daughter. She tried to bring Jayden back home, offering her safety and support. However, Jayden's emotional dependency on Ben made it incredibly difficult for her to break free. Despite the genuine concern and love from her family, Jayden felt hostile towards her mother's attempts to help. The cycle of abuse continued. Jayden's emotional attachment to Ben was so strong that even when faced with threats, she struggled to leave him. The violence only escalated. In November 2013, Jayden made a desperate choice to escape. Fearing for her family's safety and unable to return home, she sought refuge in a homeless shelter. It wasn't an ideal choice, especially for a minor, but Jayden hoped that the shelter could offer her safety and protection. On December 3, 2013, Jayden, despite her fear, decided to break her silence. Using a borrowed phone, since Ben had confiscated her own, she called him to share some life-altering news. She was pregnant. Jayden hoped that Ben, despite their tumultuous past, might find some decency in the news and take responsibility. But Ben's reaction was anything but supportive. He refused to believe her, accusing her of trying to trap him with someone else's child. The tension was palpable, and Ben's paranoia only fueled the conflict. In a bid to discuss things face to face, Jayden agreed to meet Ben. Before this meeting, she confided in her mother, expressing a newfound sense of freedom and hope. They even planned a shopping trip for the baby. Tragically, Jayden kept the full extent of Ben's cruelty hidden from her mother, fearing for her safety. On the afternoon of December 4, 2013, Jayden met Ben at Oxford Station. Their path led them to a remote field near Didcot, where Ben claimed they would have a peaceful conversation. This was, however, a ruse. As they arrived, Ben's demeanor shifted. What was meant to be a heartfelt discussion turned sinister. Ben's aggression flared, and he accused Jayden of betrayal. His rage culminated in a violent attack. In a moment of horrifying brutality, he strangled Jayden in an abandoned barn, leaving her lifeless body behind. Ben, in his twisted mind, saw this as the ultimate revenge. As if the murder wasn't heinous enough, Ben's depravity reached new lows. He desecrated Jayden's memory further by taking intimate photos he had secretly collected and threatening to release them online. His intention was clear: to drive Jayden to despair. This kind of crime, shocking as it was, lacked legal consequences at the time. The law had not yet caught up with such perversions, leaving Jayden powerless against Ben's malicious acts. But the horror didn't stop with the murder. Ben, trying to cover his tracks, decided to dispose of Jayden's body in a grotesque manner. On December 9th, just days after the murder, he returned to the scene with an old suitcase. With disturbing nonchalance, he packed Jayden's decomposing body into it, lied to his younger brother Jake about the purpose, and transported it to a nearby cemetery. Ben's pretense of burying a dead animal was as grotesque as his actions. Jayden's family, desperate and frantic, reported her missing on December 4th. The investigation kicked off, involving extensive search efforts and public appeals. As suspicions grew, all evidence pointed towards Ben. His aggressive denial and threats only fueled the investigators' suspicions. They were relentless, tracking every lead. The breakthrough came when a taxi driver reported a suspicious fare, a man with a large, muddy suitcase, leading authorities to the cemetery. Jake's reluctant confession about the suspicious digging added another piece to the puzzle. By December 19th, the investigators uncovered the grave. Jayden's body, packed in that suitcase, was found, and the autopsy revealed the brutal cause of death: strangulation, with significant trauma from blunt force. The case against Ben was built on overwhelming evidence. Jayden's mother was left to identify her daughter's body, a heart-wrenching conclusion to a case marked by unimaginable cruelty. Ben's actions and the subsequent investigation laid bare a story of violence, betrayal, and a quest for justice that had far-reaching consequences. Imagine the nightmare of being a parent and having to bury your own child. For Jayden Parkinson's mother, this was not a dark fantasy, but a devastating reality. Her daughter's life was cut short in the most horrific way by Ben, her ex-boyfriend. Jayden's journey was marred by Ben's relentless cruelty and manipulation, and while Jayden's family was left to mourn, Ben was caught up in his own twisted game. During his time in custody, Ben decided to write a confession, admitting to the crime he committed. But instead of taking full responsibility, he claimed he wasn't fit to stand trial due to mental illness. Clearly, he hoped this defense would get him off the hook. However, experts quickly debunked this tactic. They concluded that Ben was fully aware of his actions when he killed Jayden. His attempt to dodge justice was swiftly dismantled. Ben faced charges not just for premeditated murder, but also for desecrating Jayden's body. His defense tried to spin a narrative that he had no criminal intent when he took Jayden to a remote countryside spot, claiming they only planned to talk. But the reality was far more sinister. The defense also denied Ben's cruel treatment of Jayden, but the evidence told a different story. Throughout the investigation, about 10 witnesses from Jayden's circle revealed the extent of Ben's cruelty. They reported seeing visible signs of abuse and noticed significant changes in Jayden's behavior, clearly influenced by Ben's psychological manipulation. But the most chilling details came from forensic experts, who revealed that Ben strangled Jayden at least 3 times, each time reviving her only to strangle her again for his own perverted pleasure. Ben's behavior in court was nothing short of alarming. He showed no signs of remorse, often laughing at inappropriate moments, making bizarre jokes, and even threatening the prosecutor. This erratic behavior did nothing to help his case and only reinforced the jury's view of his dangerous instability. After the trial, the jury deliberated for nearly 20 hours before delivering their verdict. 11 out of 12 jurors found Ben guilty of premeditated murder, When the judge was about to announce the sentence, Ben threw a dramatic tantrum. He screamed, writhed in convulsions, and absurdly accused Jayden of conspiring against him. Despite his outbursts, Ben expressed a belief that he deserved the death penalty that has been replaced by life imprisonment in the UK since 2003. The judge sentenced Ben to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole only after 20 years. The severity of his crimes and his evident danger to society warranted the maximum penalty. Meanwhile, Ben's younger brother, Jake, faced his own legal battle. He had to prove that he didn't directly participate in the murder, but was coerced into helping Ben dispose of the body. Jake eventually convinced the jury that he was a victim of Ben's psychological pressure, living in fear of his brother. Jayden's family, deeply scarred by their loss, remains hopeful that Ben will never be released. Her mother advocates for early education on domestic violence, stressing the need for young people to recognize and avoid abusive relationships. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.